Well, very pleasant Monday to you, wherever you are. Today, I wanted to talk about one of those huge events in the history of the United States, especially since 1945, called the Cold War. The Cold War is really a struggle between the Soviet Union, Russia today, and the United States. It takes place over really the last half of the 20th century, lasting about 50 years roughly. It is an economic struggle. It is a struggle over ideas. It is a struggle never militarily against one another, but certainly it will be a struggle against the Russians and proxies or friends of ours, proxies or friends of the Soviet Union and us. It will define us as a nation. Much of the country that you know today, how we behave around the world, and even in some ways how we behave at home with one another, was shaped by the Cold War. World War II ends, and that's a great thing. Everybody's excited. There's great mourning over the roughly 60 million Americans who die in World War II. World War II, as they say, was a closely run thing. And really and truly, short of a couple of really bad choices, bad decisions on the part of Adolf Hitler, it might have gone a different way. No kidding. If you read the history of World War II, the history of the war of the world, by the time you get to about 1940, you ask yourself, am I sure the good guys won? Because it certainly doesn't look like the good guys are going to win. The war ends, of course, and we think it's going to end and usher in a new era of peace. And yet, it ushers in a new period of tension between, as I said, the United States and the Russians. Political scientists describe a phenomena called the security dilemma. From a historical, not a political scientist point of view, essentially, the security dilemma is this. Anything that strengthens my security could be viewed in a way that you believe weakens your security. And therefore, you must improve your security, which then causes me to feel that my security is weaker. Well, guess what? That describes really the Cold War. Both countries, the United States and the Russians, felt were affected negatively by World War II. The Russians lost, we think, upwards of 30 million people, largely because of the Germans. The Russians are scared to death the Germans are going to come again. They inflicted huge damage on the Russians in World War I as well. So the Russians are going to do whatever they can, from their point of view, to protect themselves against a resurgent Germany. Therefore, they create what we might call a ring of buffer states, states that were friendly to the Soviet Union because of the Red Army and because of machinations of Joseph Stalin. Well, to the United States, that looks like, here we go again, World War II all over again. What Hitler did, conquering smaller countries, this is what Stalin is doing. We were concerned about another Pearl Harbor, only this time it would be a nuclear Pearl Harbor. Remember, when World War II ends, it isn't even 4 years since the surprise attack by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor. We were scared to death that that would happen again to us, that we would be caught napping, caught unawares. You have the Russians with the largest land army in Europe, and you have the Americans who, at least in 1945, and for a few short years thereafter, had a monopoly of nuclear weapons. Either of those is a security dilemma for the other. And then the actions of Stalin to create this ring of clients, or as Churchill lovingly called it, an iron curtain that descended around the ancient capitals of Eastern Europe, worried us. And by 1947, the new president, Harry Truman, had really reached his wit's end. And he goes in front of the Congress of the United States and announces a radical departure. We cannot overemphasize how radical of a departure this was for the United States. We call this radical departure the Truman Doctrine. Essentially, the departure was this, that Harry Truman was saying we're not any longer going to be an isolationist country. For nearly 200 years, the United States had been an isolationist country. We had two big oceans, the Atlantic and the world's largest ocean, the Pacific, on either side of us. We had largely friendly neighbors to the north and to the south of us. Therefore, we could afford, and we chose, to stay out of everybody else's business and just go about doing our thing. World War II taught us that technology and transportation had greatly shrunken the world and greatly reduced our invincibility. Pearl Harbor taught us that. And so Harry Truman will say isolationism is a thing of the past. We can no longer be isolationist in a world and hope to maintain peace. The way we can maintain peace is to play a part on the world stage, be involved with the world rather than hide behind our borders. The borders would no longer protect us. And so the crux of the Truman Doctrine is, as Harry Truman said that March day 1947, when he asked for $400 million of aid to Greece and Turkey, thousands of miles away, he said to the Congress and to the American people and to the world, including the world inhabited by Joseph Stalin, it shall be the policy of the United States to help free people resist aggression from external and internal sources. Close quote. Well, unintended consequences. Joseph Stalin hears this in Russia, and security dilemma. Joseph Stalin sees this as an undeclared declaration of war against communism. Unintended consequence. The Republicans in Congress, who had not occupied the White House in nearly 20 years, said, oh, so the United States is going to help free people. Why aren't we helping China defeat the forces of communism led by Mao Zedong? Why are we not helping our good friend Chiang Kai-shek? And if we are at war, quote unquote, why aren't we ferreting out communists in the government, communists in Hollywood who are seeking to undermine us from within? If we're going to help free people, how about the free people at home? And some Democrats and Republicans, mostly Southern Democrats, will say anything that goes against the country must be communist inspired. So the civil rights movement that is just starting is communist inspired. Anything, labor unions, communist inspired. Anything that isn't the status quo must somehow be communist inspired. One other unintended consequence. Harry Truman does not specify who we are going to help. It's an open-ended commitment. It's an open-ended agreement that we will help free people. Well, where are they? Where are they located? Is it just Europeans? Which, frankly, between you and me, is who I think Harry Truman meant. But that commitment will be extended in just a couple of short years to Korea. It will be extended in about a decade to a little place called Indochina. Well, you and I know it by another name, Vietnam. We're going to talk a little more about how the Truman Doctrine and the Cold War, this titanic struggle